Hello, students. This is the video lecture about the music industry, the current stuff, or at least the more current stuff. I'm recording this lecture at the beginning of fall 2023. So maybe it's not super current, but at least it is more current than the other video lectures that you watched for this week. All right, here we go. Let's do this. The first thing that I want to clarify is that there are three music labels that dominate the music industry in the United States. When you sign to a major label, which if you're an aspiring musician, that may seem very cool. That may seem like a really nice thing to happen. The music label has connections. They can get your product into Starbucks, into Walmart, into Target. They can get you booked on SNL, Jimmy Fallon show, things like that. But they do take a significant amount of money. If you're an artist, an up and coming artist, the label will give you the money to record your album, to go on tour, make the music video. Then you got to pay all this stuff back. So you might get a million or millions of dollars from a music label, but then when it turns out to what's actually in your pocket, it's far, far less. A lot of musicians complain about this. Why do so many musicians sign with music labels then if they take so much of the money? Well, because they have the connections, as I already mentioned, right? They can get your product into different stores and they can get you booked in the right places. Universal Music Group controls, a little over half of the industry, at least according to these statistics right here. And then the Universal Music Group has a bunch of smaller labels underneath them, but they do have some pretty big artists. Sony is another big one. And again, all these labels have, smaller subsidiary labels and represent a lot of people. And then we have the Warner Music Group. Okay. And in the age of social media and the age of Web 2.0, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, an artist can theoretically, make it big without having a label, although that's still somewhat difficult to do because the industry is kind of entrenched with some sort of old legacy systems. So, I think there's positives and negatives for being on a music label. Would you rather have a small portion of a huge amount of money, or would you rather have all of the money, but the money is just it's small to begin with, right? So it's like, do you want a little piece of a pie that's huge, or do you want the whole pie for yourself? I guess it depends on the individual artist. Okay. Now, actually, I just got some current headlines, or at least current as of when I'm recording this, to kind of give you a sense of what's going on in the music industry. This kind of caught I do listen to country music. Yeah, I prefer old country music, but I do listen to new country music. And this kind of jumped out at me when I heard Luke Combs, an artist I like, doing a cover of this old Tracy Chapman song. I'm old. We've established that. So I remember when the Tracy Chapman song came out originally in the late 1980s. And then Luke Combs covers the song. And here I'm reading from the New York Times here. No, Los Angeles Times. Excuse me. She is Tracy Chapman. Is the first Black woman to have a songwriting credit on a #1 country hit. Okay, so Tracy Chapman became the first Black woman to have a songwriting credit on a #1 country hit after Luke Combs covered her Fast Car. And the song is done remarkably well. As of this recording, it has generated more than $500,000 in publishing royalties, with Tracy Chapman being the sole songwriter. There's been a ridiculous number of on-demand audio streams as well, and it's got more than 6 million video streams in the United States. In the one of the earlier lectures, I talked about music licensing, and we're going to refer to that in this video lecture today. Artists do make money from performing live. They don't make a lot of money from actually the sale of their music. They typically make more money from the publishing rights. So sometimes the publisher can also be the songwriter, but usually it's someone different, or the performer, right? You could have the songwriter, the performer, the publisher, but the music publishing rights is where a great deal of money is to be made. Another current headline, at least current as of this recording, is this Morgan Wallen hit last night. It's been a #1 hit for 16 weeks, ties a record with Mariah Carey. Could even go longer, could even be a #1 hit longer. I believe right now the country song with the most weeks at number one is Old Town Road by Lil Nas X. And there's a whole debate as to whether or not that classifies as a country song and what are the parameters of country music. Um, and another artist for whom I am not in the demographic, I must say, is Taylor Swift. My gosh, her tour, they're saying is going to be the first tour to shatter $1 billion, excuse me, $1 billion in ticket sales. It's going to make a lot of people rich. And here's a quote: "The dollar bill should have her face on it." Yes, so artists do make money from performing live, or at least some artists do make money. Taylor Swift is a rare exception in many, many ways. But no one's ever seen a live concert like what Taylor Swift is doing right now. Okay, the statistics here come from the industry. Okay, the industry trade groups put out information about the industry every year, and music industry revenue is going up. That sort of greenish, is that a green yellow? What do you call that color? Greenish yellow. That indicates the amount of money that's been made. Let's just look at the retail. Let's look at 2020, 2021, and 2022. We're, basically $16 billion, basically $16 billion made from the music industry. But where is that money coming from? Okay, I talked about music rights in one of the earlier lectures. And whenever you're going to play someone's music, like if you're a satellite radio station, an online radio station, a traditional terrestrial radio station, you have to pay different rights. If you want to use someone's music in a commercial, if you want to use someone's music in a TV show, most of the money is actually coming from streaming, people paying streaming services. Or the streaming services are free and you have to listen to ads, but the streaming services do pay. We're going to show you an interesting chart here in a moment. But yeah, most of the money is actually coming from streaming when it comes to recorded music revenue. Sync refers to the licensing that I just spoke about, using in commercials or TV shows. Actually buying a physical product, like when I was a kid, you'd buy an album, a vinyl album, or a cassette tape, and then you could buy CDs. Few people are actually doing that. There is a market for the physical product of music, but we have transitioned to an online digital streaming world, and we're seeing that in every media industry. But music is kind of leading the way in a transition towards a world where people don't really own the thing, you just stream it or rent access to it. Okay, now when it comes to that, remember there was a small piece of the pie that was actual physical product. When it comes to that physical product, and here this is in millions, most of it's vinyl. Most of it is vinyl. See, the blue represents the portion of this, pie thing here. What do you call that? Bar graph, not pie, bar graph. The blue is a portion of the bar that is devoted to CD. The sort of the greenish yellow again is vinyl. That's actually growing. That's kind of remarkable. I remember when vinyl was the only thing you could get. Or you could get cassette tapes, but cassette tapes were always considered secondary. Vinyl, big album with a nice album cover is what you wanted. That kind of went away, and people thought that had been wiped out by CDs. Lo and behold, uh, people are buying these things again. I never stop buying them. I like to buy old stuff. But it's kind of remarkable that vinyl has actually come back. So if you could remember a couple things, a couple takeaways here, most of the money is made from streaming. That's where the bulk of the money is. But within people actually buying physical product, vinyl is the big format. Now, here's what I mentioned, this chart. This is how much per stream, right, an artist might get for their music. And that's actually pretty low. That's actually pretty low when you think about it. I mean, with something like Spotify, if you had 10,000, if I was an artist and I had 10,000 streams, I'm going to get $43, which is nice, but $43 is not going to buy much. I mean, that's going to buy maybe a cheap meal for two people, right? It's like 20 bucks to go out to eat now. That's going to buy a cheap meal for two people. And if you want to actually pay your rent, support your family, make a car payment, you're going to need way more than 10,000 streams. So there are select artists, Beyonce, um, Morgan Wallen, Taylor Swift, probably the K-pop, BTS, Blackpink, right? That's the women. You know, these monster artists, they could actually make a lot of money, but I think most artists, most working musicians are not going to be making a significant amount of money here. So yes, streaming services do pay the artists, but you really have to be just so phenomenally successful to actually make a living from one of these sources. All right, now I'm going to go through some information I pulled from this. This is a year-end report uh, from a company called Luminate. They work with Billboard. I'm just going to give you a glimpse. I'm going to post the whole thing. I'm going to post the whole document on Canvas for those who are interested, for those who are so inclined, so interested in music. You could look at it. For most of y'all, I think you just want the headlines, the takeaways that I'm going to talk about here, but I'm going to kind of give you a glimpse of the kinds of information that marketers and people who are trying to get your money, the kind of information and demographic information that they collect. I found this interesting. Euphoria used a song by Labyrinth, Labyrinth. I guess it's Labyrinth, right? I don't even know if this is an artist or a band, whatever. But Euphoria, streaming TV show, uses a song, and then the on-demand streams for that artist go up. Not a surprise, not a surprise at all, but it is kind of interesting to see it broken down. Actually, if we've got specific weeks, dates indicated here. And then, okay, I already talked about, Tracy Chapman and all the money she's going to make from the success of her fast car. Um, we had two, and within the past few years, massive, massive deals for people's back catalogs. Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen. Okay, now these artists are definitely of the older generation. They were already kind of old and established when I was a teenager. Okay, so they actually predate me. Um, and they both have, countless number of really, really fantastic and memorable songs. But this is the amount of money that these artists made, not from the sale of their music, not from concert tours, but just from selling the publishing rights to their back catalogs. 600 million. Um, estimated 500 600 million for Dylan between two deals, and then estimated 500 million for Bruce Springsteen. Okay, now I'm going to talk about this thing that Luminate is. I just find this stuff interesting called Fanalytics. I guess that's what they're calling. They've taken different types of music listeners. I mean, almost everyone listens to music, right? Let's just say everyone listens to music. They've taken people, but categorized people based on their music listening patterns, their music listening habits, and trying to identify certain types of behavior. The point of this, and the same thing is done with radio station and radio station formats, the point of this is so that a marketer could find the best audience for their product. If they're coming out with a new type of teeth whitening toothpaste, what's the kind of person most inclined to buy a teeth whitening toothpaste? And so now there's not going to be any specific quiz questions about this. Okay, so don't feel like you have to memorize all this stuff. I just present it because I think it's interesting, and the overall trend is interesting of the way marketers try to analyze data and correlate specific types of people with specific types of products. But we've got the enthusiast, the devotee, radio rocker, the cool kid, and the ghost listener. Um, the enthusiast, is more likely to be male, belong to Gen X, um, engage with sports, play video game. This particular category represents 10% of music listeners. Um, the devotee, more likely to be Gen X, LGBTQ plus, listens to streaming music, right? You're more likely to purchase the music. You're more likely to streaming music, 8%. And then now we have the radio rocker. I love that hand symbol. Nice hand symbol there. The radio rocker, more likely to be a little old, Caucasian slash white, live in the Midwest, listen to AM, FM radio, stream music only for free. This is probably, I was going to say older people are saying boomers or the silent generations, people even older than boomers. Just turn the radio on while you're cooking, leave it there, listen to classic rock. Oh, and that's 28% of people. And then we got the cool kid. The cool kid. Okay, we got the cool kid here. Listen to hip hop, rap, R&B. And then this one I find interesting, the Ghost Listener. Ghost Listener to me is the miscellaneous category where they had all these people, they didn't know what to do with these people. They say 27% of people are miscellaneous. That's kind of a high number to me. They're calling it Ghost Listener. Um, People stream only through premium services, don't plan to attend any concerts, speak languages other than English, be less demographically differentiated. This means they're kind of all over the place. I think this category, they don't know what to do with. Anyway, I just present that because I think it's kind of interesting. It gives you an insight into the way marketers think and try to categorize human beings into preset categories so they can sell you stuff. All right, back to the Luminate report, and we're going to close with a couple of charts here. Now, the charts here are trying to come up with overall popularity of different albums or different songs. TEA, I believe, stands for total album equivalent or total equivalent album. SEA is streaming equivalent albums. So here they're not only taking sales, people who actually bought something, but how often something was streamed. And when you combine all of that together, Bad Bunny, this album by Bad Bunny, would be the most popular album of the year. However, look at this over here under album sales. When you're looking at album, this is for the year 2022. Taylor Swift Midnights sold more, a lot more. It means people bought Taylor Swift's album much more than they bought Bad Bunny's. However, look at the streams. People were streaming Bad Bunny way more than they were Taylor Swift, which was why Bad Bunny, according to this standard, would be the most popular album of the year. Taylor Swift's sold more. And then we got Morgan Wallen, Harry Styles, The Weeknd, the Encanto soundtrack. Okay, now here, we've gone specifically to sales. We're not looking at streaming now. When we look just at sales, Taylor Swift, Harry Styles, BTS. And wow, Taylor Swift is far and away. Okay, Taylor Swift, far and away, the best-selling album of 2022. Doesn't mean it's the most popular, but the best-selling album. And then we'll close with this share of total volume by format and genre. When it comes to music that people are paying for, music that people are purchasing, okay, not just listening to in the background, but when people are actually making a financial investment to listen to that music, whether they're streaming it or buying it, R&B and hip hop is the most popular genre in the United States. Okay, 26.8% of sort of audio consumption that people are paying for is rap and hip hop. So, if you were ever asked, hint, 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 what's the best selling genre of music in the United States, you'd say rap or hip hop. Okay. And then it goes down: rock, pop, country, Latin, dance, electronic. Okay. But rap, R&B, hip hop, R&B and hip hop, maybe I would consider those different. Anyway, these people are considering it the same. Okay. R&B / hip hop is the sort of most lucrative genre of music in the United States. Okay, that's it. I'm going to throw a little bonus music track at the end if you want to stay tuned for the end credit sequence. Otherwise, if you've answered the 4 questions, you're done.
30 seconds left.